Hello and welcome to Mental Health Hour with Dr. Tapo. I hope you are well. I hope you've been keeping well. It's been a while since we've spent the Mental Health Hour together. Over the last few weeks, I had surgery. I've been at home recovering, and it's really given me a lot of time to reflect, a lot of time to just think about my own mental health and where I am at with my life and the things that I would like to see happen for me. Things that I've had to endure, to deal with, healing from certain things. And it just really gives you perspective when, for a very, very long time, you've just been on the go. Whether it's with school, with work, with life, and other commitments. And then suddenly you have like 6 weeks where you're not working, you're not studying, and you just really, really, really need to focus on yourself and taking care of yourself. And for me, this has been quite a period of growth and, like I said, reflection. And it's really, really been good for my soul. Like I've really appreciated what it is to be still, what it is to be silent, what it is to stop. um, the rat race, right? You're constantly, it's like you wake up to go to bed, to wake up again, and it's work, 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 work. And so these last 6 weeks for me have been really great to be able to stop and slow down. It has been a struggle some days because when you're used to being busy, and now you cannot be busy because your body is demanding that you stop and slow down. It's challenging at first, but as I'm preparing to go back to work full time next week, I find myself thinking about how will I maintain some of what I've built over the last 6 weeks, some of that quiet and stillness and restfulness. So for me, it's like I said, been just a wonderful experience to learn how to take care of myself. And so I hope that you have been taking care of yourself. I hope you're healthy. I hope your loved ones are healthy. I hope you are taking care of each other. And I am glad you're here with us on the Mental Health Hour. So before I continue, as a reminder, the Mental Health Hour does not replace your qualified, registered, or licensed therapist or clinician that you're working with. Don't quit therapy and say, I'll just listen to Mental Health Hour. Because you know the one thing that I encourage most is go and get the help you need from people who are qualified, people who know what they're doing. So this is for educational and information only. Please seek the help that you need from a qualified practitioner within your area or region. Thank you to Love Bay Radio again for always providing this platform and allowing us this space for communion, for discussion, for reflection. You can write to us, you can text us. Text 437-778-3299, 437-778-3299, or you can email infolovebay@gmail.com, infolovbay@gmail.com. So, like I said, it's been a few weeks that I've been recuperating, I've been resting, I've been reflecting, and just thinking about some of even the clients, the people that I've encountered through my work as a mental health practitioner, as a therapist. And I'm going to talk to you today about some of the things that I've been reflecting on. But before we go any further, I know there were some questions and comments sent in a few weeks ago, so some of them are not quite timely anymore. But I did want to just acknowledge these people that wrote in and sent their messages. We have Louise from Brooklyn, New York. Thank you for writing in, and thank you for listening in. Thank you especially for sharing that your program comes on during your work my program, sorry, so Love Based Mental Health Hour comes on during her work hours, and she tries to take a break so she can listen, and also goes on YouTube. And yeah, if you miss a show or you want to, because sometimes uh, maybe I mentioned that we talked about trauma or something else some time ago, and you might have missed that. If you go on our YouTube channel, you can definitely find all of the recordings, or the most recent ones anyway, on YouTube, and you can listen. Even this one will be up on YouTube if you want to kind of go back and listen in again and reflect on some of the things. Because and in the hour that we have together, I'm just talking, and sometimes it's a little too much, and maybe you want to go at it a little bit slower, so you can go on the YouTube channel and listen in again. So Louise in Brooklyn, New York says when she misses a show, she does go on YouTube to catch up. And she's asking that I speak about mindfulness in families and also in the workplace. Because she says some people just blab without thinking about how they hurt others. And it's true, Louise, some people do just blab without thinking about how they hurt others. And then, whether it's at home with your family or in the workplace, we are all responsible for I always say this, we're responsible for our own responses to whatever stimuli, whatever triggers happen for us. We are responsible for how we respond, as much as we're responsible for what we put out there, right? How we might trigger or instigate, and all of that. And mindfulness is one way of being responsible. And it's not just limited to how you might hurt somebody or somebody might hurt you, because mindfulness really is about how you go through life, how you navigate life generally. So we're talking mindfulness in terms of self-care. We're talking mindfulness in terms of behavior, mindfulness in your relationships, mindfulness about even your physical health, right? Your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, all of this requires mindfulness. And so it's not just about those who tend to blab and instigate and poke at people and all of that, but it's also when these things come at you, how you respond. And mindfulness really is about the attitudes and perspectives that we take on in life as we navigate life. So if you haven't done some research on mindfulness, I really, really encourage you to go on YouTube, go on Google, and start practicing mindfulness. Now, people sometimes confuse mindfulness with like Buddhist practices, and you're thinking, well, I'm not Buddhist, or I have my own religion and all of that. Mindfulness is not a religion. It really is a way of navigating life. It's not a religion, and I know you could define religion the same way. With mindfulness, you're not praying to anyone about anything. It's really about you. How am I going to view this thing that just happened to me? How am I navigating this relationship with this person? How am I hearing this person when they speak to me? What am I paying attention to? Where am I putting my focus and my energy? Mindfulness simply means you're doing things in an intentional and reflective way. We often want to reflect after the fact, but mindfulness teaches us to reflect it during and throughout the process, right? Sometimes in my other job, we do a lot of research. And one thing I always say to my colleagues is, you don't start thinking about how you will evaluate your research or whatever it is after you've done it. Evaluation is built right from the beginning into whatever program, research, whatever it is. You build evaluation into it right from the beginning. Why? Because as you're doing research or doing your program, if you've carefully thought about how are we going to evaluate this? What do we need to evaluate? How are we going to evaluate it? What information do we need to properly evaluate? When you think of all these things before you start in that planning stage, your evaluation is going to be a lot richer. Your entire program is going to be a lot better. Why? Because you thought about it before you started to implement. And because you thought about it before you started to implement, that means as you're implementing, you're continuously thinking about your evaluation. So, right from jump, right from the beginning, right from the start, you've started to so mindfulness kind of works the same way. It's not let me reflect after I've had my huge fight with my spouse or my sibling or whoever it is. It's let me think about this before I go into that conflict, because there are some conflicts that we plan, that we know are coming, that we cannot avoid and we should not avoid. But if we practice mindfulness, we know how to go into those conflicts in a way that measures our responses, that measures the way we will even take what is thrown at us. And that's really what mindfulness is. It's not religion, it's not religious. You can be a Christian, a Muslim, a Buddhist, atheist, whatever, and be mindful. I think because people often talk about mindful and meditation, then people think like, okay, so it should be, then I should be meditating if I'm being mindful. Not necessarily. And we meditate on different things depending on our spirituality and all of that. Mindfulness is not religion. So if you've been staying away from mindfulness because you think it's religious or whatever it is not. So I really want and encourage you to do some research around mindfulness and start to practice mindfulness. It really does enrich your life, especially around relationships. How many times have you been with someone, they're on their phone, they're watching TV, you're trying to have a deep conversation and they're just out of it? That's because they're not being mindful. When somebody is being mindful, they know how to connect, they know how to listen, they know how to be present in that moment with you. And that's a gift that you can give your friends, your loved ones, your colleagues, if you're a mindful person. So I really encourage you to seek out mindfulness as a way of enriching your life and the lives around you. So thank you to Louise from Brooklyn, New York, for sharing that. And then we have Karen from Grenada. I have to admit, I've always had a hard time pronouncing Grenada. Is it Grenada, Grenada? I don't know. I hope I pronounced it correctly. But thank you to Karen who wrote to us from there. And like I said, this is from a couple of weeks back, so it's not quite timely. And she was writing around Mother's Day and said, Mother's Day is next week, and I would like you to give props, not just to mothers, but to single dads, stepmothers, grandmothers, adopted mothers who care for other people's children in Grenada. Some neighbors look after other people's children who can't take care of themselves. And absolutely, you're right. And really, thank you. And Father's Day is coming up soon in a few weeks as well. So thank you to caregivers, those people who care for children that are not theirs, who have that capacity, who have that compassion. For me, compassion is and kindness are two of the most undervalued and I think really, really, really crucial qualities in human beings. We sometimes look at people's intelligence, we look at their outward appearance, we look at what they drive and where they live and how they speak and all of that. But really, what we should be looking for, are they compassionate? Are they kind? Do they have that capacity to care for human beings that they don't have to, right? So we're talking beyond your wife, your husband, your spouse, your partner, your parents, your children, because you got to care for them. They're your family, right? But there's people out there who are caring for, there's no blood relation at all. And they've taken it upon themselves to be a caregiver to somebody else's child. And thank you for those people, for Mother's Day, for Father's Day, for Parental Day, for whatever. Thank you to those who give care where it's most needed. And then finally, and I won't spend a lot of time on this because I feel like we keep going round in circles with this issue. And hopefully, some of today's discussion will be helpful there. Um, so, how does someone emerge from a bad relationship of lies and deception? How does someone emerge from a bad relationship of lies and deception, which is a very bitter and hard pill to swallow, especially when you were forewarned and blatantly ignored the obvious signs? So, I feel like we've had many, many, many versions of this same thing. And what it comes down to is I personally, and I've talked about rather vaguely some of my own experiences, and there would be people who will be quick to say to me, I told you so. The bottom line is sometimes you have no business telling so. Let people live their lives. And if you made those choices blissfully, ignorantly, whatever it is, they're choices you made. Stand by them. Okay? You might have regrets right now. You might feel that you made the wrong choice, whatever, but you made a choice. And you should feel some level of empowerment for being able to make your own life choices, whether things work out the way you wanted them to or not. Because the honest truth is, there's a lot of things we choose to do, and they don't work out the way we would have wanted. But we made that choice. We practiced our agency and made that choice. When loved ones give us advice and warn us and all of that, let that be all it is, advice and warnings. But at the end of the day, some choices can only be made by you. And whether it worked out the way you wanted to or not, there's power in being able to make your own choices. Because the sad reality is there's some women don't have that option. We know that in some cultures, in some places all over the world, there's people who don't get to choose who they marry, who they go to bed with. There's human trafficking, there's sex slavery. They are, for whether it's religious or cultural practices, where spouses are chosen for even young people, not just women and girls. But I've lived in other places where, for example, I lived in Ireland for a while, and there are certain communities in Ireland where they get married really young, and the families have a lot to do with who they marry. So if you have that agency of being able to choose who you go to bed with, figuratively and literally, good for you. Did it work out the way you wanted? No. Do you now wallow in self-pity and self-loathing and doubting and second-guessing yourself? No. You do the work, you get over it, and you make your next choice. That's life. Life is made up of many good, bad, risky, whatever choices. The same person who hurt you with their lies and deception, they were making a choice when they did that. And they have to live with that choice. Live with yours. Just don't wallow in it. Don't wallow in regret, in self-pity, self-loathing, and all of that, because it's not worth it, to be honest. And what that does is it cripples you. So the next time you need to make that choice, you're going to have a hard time doing it because you started doubting yourself. Do you know why you carried on in spite of the obvious signs and warnings? Maybe you had your reasons, stand by them. And the next time, make your choice again. And that may work out, it may not. But practice your agency. Feel empowered that you can make that choice. And don't look at it always as some kind of weakness or fault or I make bad choices or blah, all that. You know what? There's freedom in being able to choose, and that freedom in itself is quite valuable. It's not always about how things turned out. Sometimes it's about being able to choose, being able to participate as a free individual. And when those lies and that deception comes, you get to choose as well to end that and move on and find something different or better. I think we spend too much time in regret. It's not healthy. It's normal, but it's not healthy. It's okay to regret, but do not sit there, do not stay there, do not stagnate in regret. So, what did you learn from that bad relationship? What did you learn about human beings and human nature and people's propensities to lie and deceive and be selfish and careless with other people's emotions and feelings and health and money? What did you learn? And use that to make a different, better, other decision next time. I think um, moving on, and I hope I answered you, Anonymous in Toronto, who sent us that. I was speaking with a young lady earlier this week, and like I said, I've been reflecting on some of the conversations I've had as a therapist with people in therapy, and for me, what I'm really reflecting on is agency. So when we talk about agency, what we mean is it's that power to choose, to act, to do what you want, that freedom, that power, that space and ability, that capacity as a free individual to do what you want, basically. And how precious and important that is. And sometimes we focus so much on what went wrong. We lose sight of the fact that, yes, this thing went wrong. It didn't work out the way I wanted it to. But I got to choose. And I got to experience something. Let's not undervalue experience. Experience is just something that we don't hold as valuable, as necessary. And it's experiencing good, experiencing those painful, traumatic things. We need to experience all of that. It makes us, yes, more complex human beings, but it also makes us grow in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise. Like I was saying, I've had to be still for the last 6 weeks, not going to work. I'm past going to school. Waking up in the morning and you don't have a bunch of appointments to keep, you don't have all this to do. And just like the first week, it's nice. You're like feeling, oh, this is lovely. Week 2, it's like, okay, this is nice. And then by week 3, you're like, oh my goodness, How do people do this? But it forced me to grow. It forced me to grow in ways I would not have grown otherwise. And I needed to be sick and unwell, too sick and too unwell to go to work to grow. So we need some of these experiences that we regret, definitely. But instead of focusing on the regret, focus on what it has brought out of you. Some of us discover that we're really compassionate and deep people through the difficult challenges that come into our lives, and we have no choice but to face them. You have no choice but to face this thing that has happened to you. Maybe it's somebody else that did it to you, like this last writer was talking about lies and deception. They didn't choose to be lied to and deceived, but it happened to them. And so, what do you do with that life experience? Grow from it, reflect on it, grow from it, and continue to exercise your agency to choose. That is really, really important. If you're ever in a relationship where you feel that has been taken away from you, that is probably not a healthy relationship. We've talked at length about codependent relationships. And one of the things lacking in these codependent relationships is agency, where you feel you can't choose anymore. In abusive relationships, you have to watch what you say, what you're doing. It's like you're stepping on eggshells. So that agency has been taken away from you. Sometimes it's financial. For every little dollar, you have to have an explanation. You have to ask and beg for money, even for some of your personal and private things. All of that is a lack of agency. And when you're in a position to be able to spend your money whatever way you want, decide who you want to date, decide how you want to date, do that. And so, speaking to this young woman, I really started thinking about the things that happen to us when we're small, when we're young, when we're depending on the people doing these things to us for protection and safety and security, and they give us the opposite. And years later, we are struggling with the ramifications and vicissitudes of growing up in an abusive home. And this is the situation with this young woman who is now trying to navigate her own relationships and realizing as she's doing that she's starting to repeat certain patterns that she saw in her caregivers as she was growing up. And these are harmful, traumatizing patterns, but they're familiar. And so now she's seeing herself doing some of these things and judging herself and loathing herself and just refusing to sometimes even face herself in the mirror. And it's important that we think about these things because, yes, we have the stresses that we might be experiencing now, but some of the things that might have happened, and we talked about this when we were talking about triggers and trauma, might have happened a long, long time ago. You had absolutely no control, no agency in that situation. And now maybe you're a young adult like this young woman, and it's starting to impact you, or it has always impacted you, but now you're starting to realize it. And the reason why she's starting to realize it is because she was brave enough to seek help, to seek therapy. And in seeking therapy, she's learning about the impact of what she witnessed as a child over and over again. Her parents fighting physically, the abuse within that family physically, not against her, but the parents against each other. And now, because she's engaging in romantic and sexual relationships, she's starting to see some of these things happening in her own life. And she realized, I need help. I need help. And by getting help, she's able to face some of these things and separate even from fault finding, right? We tend to look at relationships, especially when they break down and don't go well and things are horrible, that somebody is to blame. And I'm not saying that's not the case. Like, if you are married to a person who is unfaithful and cheating and lying and all, that's definitely their fault. That's on them. But that's not what's important. The important thing is, where are you now in this situation? You can continue to face the situation head on, look for, how do I emerge from this in a healthy way? Or you can continue to look for, and then he said this and he did that, or she said this and she did that, and you're blaming and blaming and regretting and blaming and regretting and blaming, and you're not moving forward because you're focusing on whose fault is it, and you're focusing on what went wrong. What you should be focusing on is, how am I doing with all of this? And what do I need to do to make sure that when the dust settles, I'm healthy? And when the dust settles, I'll be okay. Right? So think about these things. And what I want us to look at today is what are called defense mechanisms, right? And defense mechanisms, which it So we'll be looking at what are called defense mechanisms. I'm sorry, I think there was a bit of a glitch there for a moment. Apologies, apologies. So defense mechanisms, which we might think are a good thing, because, like, why wouldn't you want to be defended or to defend yourself? But what defense mechanisms basically, a simplified definition is, it's something we do unconsciously to guard against or protect ourselves from something that we think might harm us mentally. So we are trying to block whatever that thing is. We're trying to avoid it, trying to run away from it. And so these defense mechanisms kind of kick in unconsciously. It's not like you sit down and think, oh, it's now time to engage my defense mechanisms. It doesn't work that way. So we're going to look at some of them today. And why I think this is important is because sometimes what happens is, we know we're not in a good situation. We know we're not happy. And I've said this before, nobody can be happy 24/7, 365, and all of that. But there's a general idea of contentment in life where you can feel joy, you can feel calm, you can enjoy certain things, socializing, not isolation, but yeah, isolation, whatever it is, and be okay, right? And then generally, when we talk about being happy, we're looking at not a moment in time, but just a general feeling over a period of time in our lives. And so what I'm talking about in this situation is when certain things are happening, or something has happened, or there's been some kind of trauma or some kind of threat to our mental health, and we unconsciously engage these defense mechanisms to protect ourselves. Okay, so we're basically foreseeing or dreading or thinking there's going to be some kind of mental and emotional harm, and we engage these defense mechanisms unconsciously. You don't sit down and plan for them. And so, an example that most of us would be aware of is denial, right? When something is clearly happening, it's impacting you, those red flags or warnings or whatever it is, maybe it's something that has already happened, but because of the harm that it did to us mentally and emotionally, we engage that defense of denial. We act like it never happened. Even when people bring it up, we're like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Or no, that's not, no, it's not like that at all. So, and I like to talk about some of the things that we've co-opted into pop culture. How many times have you heard people saying you're in denial, or she's in denial, or he's in denial? That's a defense mechanism, when you just simply refuse to see and acknowledge something that might happen or has happened because of the threat to your emotional and mental health. And this is unconscious. So denial is that refusal to accept the reality or the facts. You just plain won't. They can smack you upside the head, you just still will not accept or acknowledge because of that emotional impact. So that's an example of a defense mechanism. And why is it important for us to identify these things? And I'll go through some of them, as many as I can today. But why is it important for us to have this knowledge? Because so many of us are not getting the help that we need. Even when we can access it, even when we can afford it, even when it is available and accessible, we're not getting the help that we need. Why? Because of those defense mechanisms. The thing is, you might be in denial, but that thing did happen. It is real, it is a fact, and it is impacting you. No matter how steeped you are in denial, it is impacting you and likely impacting the people around you. So as long as you're in denial, you're prolonging that impact, maybe even making it worse. So it's important to identify, mitigate, rectify these defense mechanisms in our mental and emotional makeup or structure, or wherever we are right now. Are you in denial about something? And some of us, our minds have become so good at denial, denying things, that we've convinced ourselves and the people around us that we're okay. But deep down, you know you're not. And you know that there's something heavy that you're carrying, and it's impacting you and it's impacting the people around you. You can be smiling to the rest of the outside world. You can convince yourself you're good, you're strong, you're over it, you're whatever. But the fact that you are engaged in that denial means there's some harm that has been done, that is being done, and that will continue to be done. So if you're one of those people that tends to act like nothing happened or act like nothing's wrong, snap out of it. Get the help you need. Get the help you need, because that thing doesn't go away. As long as you're in denial, it is not being resolved. And if it's not being resolved, the impact is prolonged. And that's how defense mechanisms work. They might cover up for a moment what has happened, but the impact stretches over time. Another example, I'm trying to think of ones that we commonly use: projection. You hear a lot of people, stop projecting on me. She's projecting, he's projecting. And what that means is you're taking something that you are feeling and then saying somebody else is feeling that. So whatever is going on for you, instead of acknowledging that this is going on for me, I then say it's going on for my child, my sister, whoever it is, rather than acknowledging that this is me. So let's say you don't like someone. So instead of admitting I don't like someone, I might say that my sister doesn't like that person. Or I might even say that person doesn't like me. I'm projecting whatever it is I'm feeling onto someone else. And I'm saying those feelings belong to someone else, not me. That is projection. So the problem with projection is once you attribute those feelings to somebody else, once you put those feelings on someone else, you are then required to respond to that person like what you've projected on them is real or true. And sometimes the unfortunate thing is you then require other people to do the same. So let's say, for example, you're in your workplace, you don't like someone, or maybe you feel judged by someone, right? And so you might then say that, oh, Bob was judging so and so for this and that. And you're telling Larry that Bob feels this way, but it's really you. Now, Larry is going to react to Bob based on what you said, but they're not Bob's feelings, they're yours. So it complicates relationships because now Larry and Bob have a problem based on your feelings. And because now you're seeing the way Larry is now acting towards Bob, you realize, well, if I act that way, Larry's going to hate me as well. So it just really, really poisons and complicates relationships. Projection does. And it's another way of avoiding things you need to deal with. So you give them to somebody else. And you yourself, who has that problem, who has that situation, you're not facing it, you're not dealing with it. It's like you've given it to someone else, except it is still inside of you. Just because you've projected it to somebody else doesn't mean you don't still have to deal with whatever consequences or ramifications. That is still on you. But you've complicated things with projection. And really, why people project most of the time is because they're afraid, so fearful, they're anxious, it makes them uncomfortable, they don't know what to do with it, so they're trying to give it to somebody else. And so if you're somebody who tends to project, What you need to learn to do is to be comfortable with whatever it is you're feeling. Own your feelings. Own your feelings. And I've often said that feelings themselves are not good or bad. We think of anger as a bad feeling. It's actually not. It's what you do when you're angry that might be bad, but the feeling, the emotion itself is not bad. And then we have thoughts, right? And I've said this in past sessions, when we take our emotions and our thoughts and we attach them, we create feelings. And those thoughts keep going in our heads. So people who project often also ruminate quite a bit, right? Those thoughts keep going on and on and on and on in your head. And then you end up projecting them to somebody else because you don't know what to do with them. They're making you uncomfortable or fearful or anxious or whatever it is. So we project. So that's another example of a defense mechanism. And like I said, the thing about defense mechanisms is it might work for a moment, but it doesn't solve the issue. It doesn't resolve the problem. And especially where we're talking about things like really deep trauma, right? This is not just about like little fights on the playground type thing. Normally, we're talking about life impacting thoughts and emotions and feelings and events and traumas that we're defending against unconsciously. And what I'm trying to do is to help you bring those things from the unconscious so that you can be mindful, right? We started off talking about mindfulness and we're circling back around that. So once you learn to see that I tend to use this defense mechanism, I tend to project, I tend to deny, I tend to regress or to displace my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, whatever is going on for me. I tend to engage in a certain defense mechanism. Once you understand that about yourself, you can mindfully deal with things rather than defend against them. So I just mentioned displacement, which is another defense mechanism. And displacement is when you direct. So it's a little bit like projection, but not quite. So displacement is when you direct your strong emotions or frustrations towards another person or object because they're easier or it's easier. I'll give an example. Let's say you are a child on the playground, right? And a huge big bully comes and knocks you down. You look at this bully, you're helpless. There's nothing you can do. Maybe they've been bullying you for a long time. And then your friend comes and they try and help you up. And what do? You shove your friend and you hit your friend. Now, your friend did not bully you, they didn't hit you, they didn't do anything to you. But they're the ones you lash out at. That is displacement. And you do nothing to the bully because the bully is a lot more threatening, it's a lot scarier. You don't feel that you would win that, or there would be like, it would even be safe. So instead of directing your anger, your response, or whatever towards the bully, you turn on your friend. So that's displacement. Now, displacement is when you direct your strong emotions and frustrations towards a person or object that is less threatening. Projection is when you say what you're thinking and feeling is what somebody else is thinking or feeling. So let's not confuse those two. And denial is simply acting like it never happened. It's not true. It never happened. Okay. So the thing with displacement is we often hurt our loved ones because they're there, because we take them for granted, because we don't think they'll ever go anywhere. They're more understanding. They know what we're going through. So you have a boss at work that is just driving you crazy. You come home from work and you take it out on your spouse. That's displacement, because you can't speak up at work. You can't deal with what's happening at work, but you come home and you take it out on your spouse and children. That is displacement. And what ends up happening is you destroy those family relationships because they're wondering, like, what did I ever do to you? I'm trying to be here for you, but I love you and I didn't say or do anything wrong. Why am I being punished? And they don't know. They might know what's happening to you at work, but it's the fact that it's not on them, but you're taking it out on them. That's displacement. It can destroy relationships. And displacement, I'm using a lot of conflict related examples here as I'm talking about displacement, but it happens in other situations. So, for example, if somebody is feeling inadequate or insecure about something, they might take those emotions of insecurity, inadequacy, impotence, whatever it is, and displace those emotions onto somebody else. I'm thinking here of an example where a man was actually displacing some of what was going on for him as a man. Lost his job, didn't have an income, all of that. And instead of dealing with those emotions and frustrations, he decided to go and cheat. And the way he did it was in such a way as to hurt his spouse. Like his whole affair was designed to make her feel small, inadequate, and all of that. And he made sure she found out. So instead of dealing with what was happening for him, he took it out on his wife in this really horrible way. So displacement requires us to deal with our own emotions and frustrations instead of taking them out on somebody else, because that destroys relationships. And when whatever that thing, like the example with the bully, now it's time to go home. Maybe you and your friend usually walk home together, but because you shoved them instead of the bully, they don't want anything to do with you anymore. So you end up isolated, you break really good relationships, and you feel even worse. So displacement is a defense mechanism where we take things out on the wrong people. Projection is where we put our own thoughts and feelings and say they belong to somebody else. And then denial is acting like, nope, that's not it. That's not what's happening here. Okay, so I'm looking at our time. We won't have a lot of time for too many more. So maybe I'll do one more. And as a reminder, you can text or you can email us. Text 437-778-3299, or you can email infolovebay@gmail.com. Today we're talking about defense mechanisms, which are ways that instead of dealing with the emotional and mental things or stresses or factors that are impacting our health generally, our relationships, our productivity, our joy and happiness, and all of that, defense mechanisms prevent us from dealing with those things, and we need to. I keep encouraging you, go and get the help you need from a qualified person. I'm not saying go talk to the guy at the bar about your problems, because that's probably just going to end in you consuming too much alcohol, which binge drinking, risk of alcoholism, Let's not go there, but deal with things. We need to deal with things. And one of the things I said to this young woman is sometimes, and I think I've said this on Mental Health Hour, sometimes we're not quite ready to share what's been happening for us with another human being. Journal it. Start by sorting it out for yourself, but promise yourself, commit to yourself that you will get the help you need. You owe it to yourself. I always talk about invest in yourself. You can be all things for all people, but if you are not doing what you need to do for your mental health, you are probably engaged in one of these defense mechanisms. I think I will end with, let's see, one that won't take too long. Compartmentalization. Okay, so compartmentalization is when you break your life up into little pieces, right? So your relationships at work, let's say, again, let's go back to that boss that's driving you crazy, because apparently that's what bosses do. And 70% of people say their employers are that responsible for their mental health more than anything else, including their spouses and children and cats and dogs at home. So let's see what the boss is doing. So the boss at work, not very good to you. It's stressing you out. You're worried about your job all the time. So instead of dealing with that, by maybe having a conversation with the boss, maybe looking for a job somewhere else, you put it in a little box and you tuck it away. Things are happening at home, you put it in a little box and you tuck it away. And you divide your life into these small little pieces. So when you're at home, you never talk about work. When you're at work, you never talk about home. When you just act like that part of your life does not exist at all. Now, the problem with this is when you compartmentalize like this is at some point it becomes overwhelming because you're not actually dealing with things. It's a little bit like denial, but not quite. And not to be sexist or genderist here, but men tend to compartmentalize more than women do. And sometimes maybe that's the thing to do, but often it's not. Compartmentalizing is like chopping your life up into little pieces and keeping them in boxes. And you file this box away and take out this one. You file that box away and take out this one. So you're not living a whole life. And you're not facing things you need to face. And eventually, those boxes become too small because you're not actually dealing with things. You have an argument with your spouse, you put it in a little box and you pack it away. 2 weeks later, you have the same argument, you find another little box, you pack it away. How many of those little boxes do you end up with? So it starts to overwhelm you mentally, emotionally, and eventually physically because you're not dealing with things. And some people compartmentalize in the most destructive ways. I personally have always thought you cannot be a cheater or unfaithful if you're not compartmentalizing. You have your wife, your husband, whoever at home. They live in that little box. When you leave home, you tuck them away in that little box, and then you go out with whoever it is you're cheating with. They have their own little box. So even that in itself, if you think about it, infidelity, unfaithfulness is compartmentalization. And eventually it implodes because you run out of space and you run out of little boxes and It's not a way to live. Okay, so that's another defense mechanisms. We'll continue next week looking at defense mechanisms, how they impact our mental health, and how we need to deal with things head on in healthy, constructive, self-compassionate ways that allow us to be the best selves we can be for ourselves, our loved ones, our employers, the rest of the world, whoever. We owe it to ourselves to be the best we can be in any place, any situation, because we've done the work we need to for our mental and emotional health. So our time is up. Thank you for listening, Love Bay family. I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of the week. Enjoy the weather. If you're in a place with really great weather, be careful if you're not. Let's be kind to each other, compassionate to each other. See you next week.